Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today. No, not wrap up today. We're going to continue today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me what I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Richard. At some point, you have to cover Cecil Taylor. I know out there jazz isn't your wheelhouse, so I'm picking one with a relatively concise structure. His music somehow grooves with no apparent time signature. Cecil Taylor's Taht from Winged Serpent. No apparent time signature, huh? Well, I'll go into everything with an open mind. That's an important thing to do. Let's dive into this and see what's going on with Cecil Taylor's Taht. Well, that was certainly something. Um, positives. Let's start with the positives. The production on this was stellar. It is not easy to have such cacophony delivered in a way that is accessible. There is a clarity to the overall production. There was spaciousness. Every instrument felt like it was placed in a specific area around me, and none of them really seemed to overlap in any way. I could clearly make out what any specific instrument was doing at any given time, which I think is extremely important. Which I think is extremely important for this track in my approach to listening to it, at least. I guess we're done with the production. It's a solid production. I don't think there's anything in here that stands out to me. It's just very clear and clean. So yeah, the clarity in the production is really important because the way that I listened to this was one instrument at a time. I dared not zoom out and take the whole thing in too often because it's simply overwhelming. But when you zoom in on a specific instrument, it's really interesting to find that most of them are rigid in their ideas. The song is fairly chaotic, no set time signature, no set key. In fact, most of the instruments appear to be out of tune, as was noted around the 7-minute mark when we heard a bunch of instruments play the same exact note and it was still full of dissonance. There's very little, if any, element of the music that holds these instruments together, their individual lines. But when you do listen to their individual lines, there is a rigidity to them. There's a singular focus. There is pacing, tempo, key signature. Even the idea, I mean, just tempo and time signature together is going to give you rhythm and flow and patterns. The way that they loop in upon themselves, it's almost as if this is a collage of several ideas from maybe even different tracks. Hey, trumpet player, play bars 5 through 7. In this song that we did, and saxophone player, you're gonna play bar 21 to 37. I don't know from that same song, and the piano, you're gonna play bar 1 from this other track, and go. And so we have a variety of internal time signatures. Every instrument has their own time signature, their own tempo, their own key signature, their own length of phrasing, which crafts their own patterns. Um, but when you zoom in on each one of them, they're constrained to specific rules. The chaos is created through order, which is fascinating in an experimental sense. The end result, I think, is not something I'm ever going to listen to again, but I think it's just that sheer concept of utilizing rules and precision and order overlapping each other in various ways to create chaos from order. I think that's just, it's neat. It makes me want to try it. Uh, Probably won't release anything like that, but it's an interesting experiment, I think. Oh, maybe I'll toss that up for next month's what's it called? Composition jam. Chaos through order. That'll be a fun theme. Yeah, let me write that down before I forget. Chaos through order. I spelled through THRU because I'm cool like that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all of the compositional notes I have as well. On the macro level, it's noise. On the micro level, it's order. It's uniformity. It's expected elements. It's control. But on the full level bird's eye view, I don't really have anything to say about this. It's just a lot of a lot. Aside from listening into a specific instrument and getting into their groove, I don't know what was it Andrew? Richard, sorry, was going on about. It says that there's somehow groove despite the lack of a time signature. And that's not to say that there isn't, and that's not to say that they didn't feel it. Um, Everybody experiences music differently, and especially when it comes to something like this, where I'm a bit of a fish out of water, my ears just aren't as tuned to stuff like that. So it's very possible that they found a groove in this track, but I did not. I could listen to an instrument. If I checked in with the drums specifically, they had a rigid tempo and time signature and a pattern that goes in it. There was groove to be heard in that instrument, but on the larger level, taking in the whole song simultaneously, there is just very little here that I can latch on to for groove, for story. The atmosphere is just chaos that could represent so many different things. It's a lot of sounds competing for attention. It's just chaos in a lot of ways. But there is one other aspect that I think is worthwhile to speak about, and that's the performance aspect. Given that everything is looping here, it doesn't feel like this is improvised at all. It very well could be. I don't know. It's the same thing in other situations where I'm like, this sounds like it was improvised, but it might be pre-composed. Uh, the inverse is true here. A lot of this sounds pre-composed to me, which means that when played live, all of this needs to be done perfectly. And one of the neat things that you might not really know until you've been in a group performance like this is how much you rely on the person next to you in your performance. And this is true for a lot of collaborative performances, whether it's music or theater, even collaborative art. You're always kind of bouncing ideas off of the other person physically. You don't necessarily need to talk about it, but you're waiting for cues from them or specific, they do something specific and you kind of improvise a little off of it. Um, well, in music specifically, if you realize you're a little bit out of tune, on the trumpet at least, there's multiple valves that we can pull out and push in to allow us fine control over specific notes, even. Um, and if you hear that, you can make one of those adjustments on the fly, or you can move your whole tuning slide. Yeah, tuning slide. Um, Especially if you're like a trombone player where everything is minute changes, you're constantly listening into those around you. And even when it comes to stuff like entrances, say you have 4 bars off, you're not playing for 4 bars. When you're practicing the first couple of times, you might be counting out 4 bars, but by the time you're doing a performance, you're just waiting. Oh, when the flutes do this line, I have one more beat, and then I come in. You're feeling it out with the rest of your performers, everybody else in the performance. That's not possible here. If you listen into anybody else and try to lean into their tuning, try to lean into their key signature, try to lean into their tempo or time signature, it's not going to work. You might be able to pair your lines against somebody else's lines, but everybody's an individual here, and it's just a completely different way to go about playing music. And I think that on a performative level, it takes, especially if you've come from a more traditional background, it's going to take some time to wrap your head around this concept of being a singular performer in a group rather than being part of the group. There needs to be a real strong sense of identity as a performer here, and you just need to be able to go into this. And at least from my perspective, as somebody who has never played something like this, I would need to find Zen and block out everybody else and just do my thing. Because the moment I start listening to somebody else, I'm going to want to sync up with them in some parameter, maybe in all of them. And that's not how the song is performed. That would actually be incorrect. And so, at least for me, it would go against a lot of the fibers of my being, a lot of the muscle memory I've built up as a performer to do something like this. I would have to fight against a lot of things that are just kind of innate to me now. And so, to find not just one person ready to do that, but the 12 to 15 people I think that are probably in this band who can all do that perfectly every night. It probably isn't as difficult as I'm making it sound. 12 people out of 8 billion. But I don't know. It seems like a feat to perform this because it goes against conventional wisdom of musical performance. And I just want to point that out for people who might not have done collaborative art before, whether it's music or theater or sculpture or whatever. There's a lot of unspoken leaning on, leaning on to other people, and kind of bouncing off ideas from them non-verbally. And you literally can't do that here. And it just seems like such a foreign environment to perform music into me. I think that's going to wrap this up. I don't have a lot to say about the composition. It's just a lot of noise. For the most part. I mean, we had our unified note moment at the end where everyone was out of tune but still playing the note. We had a little bit of silence there around minute 3, but for the most part, it sounds like walking into a practice hall and everybody's warming up. Oh, one more note on the performance, and then we'll definitely wrap this up. There are some lines in here that are just ridiculous skill level. There was one part on the piano. I mean, some parts on the piano feel like just laying your arm down across several keys and calling it a day. But there was two parts in particular where they were runs, and these were massive. I swear we're looking at a 100 key piano, and we are just going through the entire, what is that, 6 octaves, I think, from the lowest note to the highest note and everything in between, but they were specific jumps between them. It wasn't just like starting on the lowest note and dragging your finger across all the white keys or something. Very specific notes were chosen to go up and to go back down, and those notes were consistent every time, and it was fast too. And I'm just thinking about the speed and precision needed to do this really fast run consistently, the right notes every time. Even within a setting of unification of sound, this would be difficult, but you're trying to do it while being in your own zone and keeping your own time signature, your own tempo, your own internal tempo, while everyone else has their own as well. And like I said, fighting that urge to line up with the person playing next to you while also doing this complicated, physically demanding section. Yeah, the performance of this is just bonkers. It really is. And I think that's my only takeaway here. The production is solid, the composition is noisy, and the performance, the skill level required for this is just insane. I don't think I have anything else to say about it. I don't have any emotional connection to it. I didn't get a story told. It's like I said, to my ears it's just noise. But I mean, that's the same thing I said about black metal 3 years ago, and look where I'm at now. I'm breaking it down pretty well. So I'm sure there's a case here where it's just a very weak ear for listening to these more avant-garde style of composition. I'm just not used to it, and I don't recognize the nuances, and I don't have the vocabulary for it yet. But it's a journey. Those are my thoughts on Cecil Taylor's Taht. Every time I see that, I think it's a typo because I have typoed that so many times in my life, writing the word that and hitting the A before the H and then just sending it and be like, oh, that is terrible. Cecil Taylor's Taht. What did you think of this? Did you enjoy it? Anything that stood out to you? Was there anything I touched on that you wish I would have expanded on? Maybe you have your own perspective on it, or maybe there's things that I said that you just completely don't agree with and you want to let me know your side of things, please do so in the comments below. List all that, type all that. I don't know. List, that's a weird thing. In the description box is a link for Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. You can find ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord. You can find my music in there. So much more. Go ahead and check that out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. We do have a creator request next. I always urge people to check that out. We find some phenomenal upcoming music and new bands through that program. If you're not interested, though, tomorrow we will have an album review, same time as always, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sunday, we have a public live stream at 11 a.m. Eastern. I have 3 tracks I'm going to get through that are set aside from Patreon live streams, and then I have probably about 80 minutes just open with no requests for it, so I'm just going to be taking live requests. And we'll do that for 2 hours from 11 to 1 Eastern Standard. 11 a.m., 1 p.m. All right, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.